Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be a part of the Smile-A-Thon. I don't care what time of the day it is. I honestly don't. It can be the middle of the night for all I care. Somewhere, as the song says, it's 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock either in the morning or 5 o'clock in the evening. And it's 5 o'clock in the evening. Let's hope you're someplace having something to drink with friends. But no matter what time of the day it is where you're at, for me, any time of the day is the right time to smile. That's why I like Ken Rashawn's card that he gave me at the Toastmasters District 84 conference over the past weekend here in Florida. It was a great experience, which reminds me, you need to know a little bit about me. So let me tell you who I am, and then I'm going to tell you an interesting story about smiling and about laughter and about how it can influence you throughout the course of your life. First of all, my name's John Morrow. I'm a guy that came out of retirement. On June the 9th, I'll be 75 years of age. That's 3/4 of a century old. Do I act old? Do I look like I'm 75? Honestly, when I was a kid, I had an idea that 50 was just really, really old, wrinkled, the whole 9 yards. What did I know? I knew nothing. But as I've grown older, there's a lot that I have to be thankful for. I met a Florida girl. I call her my Florida Orange Blossom. Now, sadly, she's deceased. June 2nd, she will have been dead for 6 years. I lost her to a heart attack. But I go on. And one of the reasons why I came out of retirement is because I believe in the idea of giving people the right kind of mindset with a purpose for moving forward and living forward. So part of that process is I wrote this, oops, I'm pointing the wrong way. I wrote this book. I also do a podcast. I have to look to see where I'm pointing because it's a Zoom background. And up above me, it says there's nothing as beautiful as a Florida Gulf Coast sunset because I live in Lakeland, Florida, which is roughly 26 miles from downtown Tampa, Florida. Once you cross the Tampa Bay, you go over to places like Clearwater, St. Petersburg, and all those great communities that fall between those two areas, what I call the Gulf Coast. And I've been over to Treasure Island, and that particular picture you see behind me is actually a sunset on the Gulf Coast at Treasure Island, Florida. I've been here since 1975. I thank my wife for that because she was born and raised in Florida. I'm not. In case you're wondering, this orange that I wear, which is my brand color, is actually what I adopted from being a Tennessee volunteer because I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Now, let's talk about the life that I've lived and why smiling is so important. But before I go any further, I want to be sure that you're smiling because you need to keep smiling. That's what Ken says. Ken also is a great author, writes great books. This is a book that I scored from him. Thank you, Ken, very, very much. And for laughs, I am thoroughly into the no nonsense book on nonsense because when it comes to nonsense, I live and breathe what you call the crazy, extraneous, ridiculous trivia. Plus, like him, I enjoy talking about the silly things we say. I think it was David Letterman once that talked about stupid human tricks. Well, I sometimes talk about these stupid human faux pas verbally that we do because as a professional speaker and as a Toastmaster and having been a Toastmaster in some way, form, shape, or fashion since 1985, this DTM that follows my name, which stands for Distinguished Toastmaster, in my case stands for Does Talk More. Also, in meetings, I will say to people, that's my clue or cue to you, don't time me. But I'm on a clock here for this, so I want to tell you something about smiling. Smiling will keep you living longer. We all have circumstances in life that put us in peril, and we can't predict everything. But one of the things I have learned, and it's been scientifically proven, is that people who smile use fewer muscles in their face, therefore their face is healthier. So imagine, if you would, the idea of not smiling and what your face might look like besides looking sad, all those wrinkles and sagging from going like, do you really want to look that way? Do you ever set out in public like like my late wife and I used to do when we were in the mall or in a park or in a community area, depending upon the weather, and we'd watch people go by. And when you've been with someone in the case like my wife for almost 46 years, you tend to be able to read each other's body language and facial expressions and gestures and even arm movements without even so much as having to ask them to explain what they're thinking about. This is true of laughter. Laughter is something that is very, very infectious. My introduction to smiling and to laughter and to enjoying life is anchored and cored deep into the lives of my two parents, my mother and father. My dad was named Raymond. My mother was Mary. Dad was born in 1924. Mama was born in 1929. They were both children of the Great Depression. They had their maturation periods of time, and Dad, because he was born in 1924, actually reached a point, if my math is correct, where when he was 18, he enlisted in the Army, but the war was ending in Europe. So he wound up being in the U.S. Army and being deployed to the occupation Germany forces for a time. Then later, he was in the military during the Korean conflict, but he was never deployed to Korea. Mother, 5 years his junior, they actually married when she was 17 because 8 days after she turned 18, I was born. He was a cradle robber. And I can remember in the 1950s. Now stop and think for a second. The 1950s. There's some of you out there that may remember the 1950s. You were part of the 1950s. I was in a southern city, Chattanooga. It's a different world in the South in the 1950s. And I won't talk about things that were not good. I'll talk about the things that made my life meaningful. My parents both worked. You heard correct. They both worked. This was the exception, not the rule. Dad was the breadwinner. He also had finished in the military using the GI Bill. He had gone to technical school. He had learned how to fix typewriters. He worked for Underwood, later to become Olivetti Underwood. He was a typewriter, and later he would learn how to do adding machines and calculators and things of that sort. He stayed on the cusp of the technology that was common in that day and age. Dad was the breadwinner. He kind of, as the songwriter said, brought home the bacon. But Mama also worked. And there was a reason for this. Mom and Dad both being products of the Great Depression and knowing what it is to live in total being poor. They grew up poor. Dad was born and raised in Chattanooga. Mother was born and raised in Northeast Alabama. They were poor. They all had to contribute in order to be able to have enough just to put food on the table, to keep themselves able to live to see the next day, to become productive again. But because of that, they made a decision early on that they didn't want their children to have the same experience they did as children. And Mom and Dad both worked, and Mother was the exception to the rule, because back in that day, women were supposed to stay home, have children, be barefoot in the kitchen, and washing dishes and taking care of the kids and washing clothes and all that stuff. But Mom and Dad made it work. We were always put down during school time at between 8:30 and 9 o'clock every night. Now, remember, this is the 1950s, so I would say probably 1958, 1959. We're in a two-bedroom rental on Calhoun Avenue in the South Chattanooga area, not that far from where the Chattanooga city limits borders with North Georgia city limits in the community of Rossville, Georgia. Now, Mom and Dad were renting this place. It was a flat top. Did you hear me? A flat top house, painted white, some kind of concrete slab, maybe stucco, tar roof on top. Flat top. It was a rental. We would get our first real house in 1961 when I was 11. But here we are in this house. We have this one TV with two channels. That's right. In the late 1950s, there were two channels. One was NBC and one was CBS. And Mom and Dad would stay up watching this little box with a strange looking screen, black and white. And Dad loved comedies. He also was a big Gunsmoke fan. I knew that Dad was watching a comedy. I don't know what comedy he was watching, but it was not unusual for us on certain nights of the week to be awakened by Dad's laughter. I mean, Dad didn't just laugh, he howled. He laughed out loud like crazy. And I grew up hearing Dad laugh that way. And what's interesting, even into my adult years and being a father and now a grandfather, I can still remember those days before my father passed away where we would watch him and he would lose it. We were on a bus one time taking a tour from Las Vegas and we were going to see the Grand Canyon. And on the way back from the Grand Canyon, it was a drive of about 3.5 hours from the North Rim at Bright Angel Point to where we would get off in Las Vegas and go to our hotel. They had a movie system in the bus, and there were screens in front of everybody, plus up on the ceiling of the bus. And they were showing an RV movie, a comedy with Robin Williams. And I want you to know that was so absolutely funny and outrageous. But my dad was the loudest laugher in the group. I was enjoying it too, and I was having the time of my life, as was my wife and my mom and my sister and her husband as well. It was a family gathering that we went to in Las Vegas, and we got to see the Grand Canyon. But the trip back, watching that movie and hearing Dad's laughter, that still echoes inside of me to this day. I absolutely positively believe in the idea that smiling isn't just healthy for you. Smiling isn't just therapeutic. Smiling isn't just a way to engage. Smiling isn't just a way to express your approval and appreciation. Smiling is a connector. Think about it for a second. If you're walking on the street, in a building where you work, on the floor where you happen to have your cubicle, in a mall or a shopping center or outdoors or in a park or in a community or in your own neighborhood, and you see someone else, and immediately the first thing you notice when you get a look at their face is they don't look happy. They don't look like they're having a very good day. Is that going to really prompt you to want to approach and even say something as simple, "Hi, how you doing today?" Or "Everything okay? What's up? Anything good?" Generally speaking, people kind of send you messages, and maybe that's the message they want to send. But I discovered something. Even on your worst day, you can get out of your car at a shopping center when you're going grocery shopping or going to work, no matter how difficult your day may seem, you can put on a smile. And I'll make you an absolute guarantee. If you keep smiling, and I'm looking for my card, there it is. If you keep smiling, people are going to smile back. People are going to notice. And you know what? Somebody that you've never met who could be one of the most important transforming relationships you'll ever make in your life as part of growing your community of peers and friends. A smile is the passport to a better life, greater friends, better fellowship, happier results, greater health, and relationships that will last for your entire life. I'm John Morrow. My podcast is Resolve to Live Forward. Thanks for joining me. Now, make me a promise. Keep smiling, okay? Thank you so very much.